Hello and welcome to the Photography and Video Show podcast for February 2024. I'm David, and in this month's extended episode, we hear about some exciting new camera launches from Olympus, Hasselblad, Samsung, and, Lego? We take to the skies with Carys Kaiser to learn about her journey from TV producer-director to TV drone pilot and photographer. And we speak with the Photography and Video Show's Hazel Soper to get the gossip on what is new and who is new at this year's in-person show at the NEC in Birmingham from the 16th to the 19th of March. And joining us aboard the Camera News Express today is Digital Camera World editor James Artaius. James, how have you been?
I'm very, very well, thank you, David. It's new year, new me, new gear, new stuff to be excited about. So great time to be chatting with you about all things shiny and new.
Well, we've certainly been in a bit of a news desert over December and maybe January as well, with things like Black Friday and January sales and so on taking over the news headlines. And understandably, I think camera manufacturers and kit manufacturers have been, I guess, reluctant to release new stuff when everything's about deals and getting rid of old stock cheaply. Certainly seems that there's a lot of news happening out there at the moment.
It does, and I think for photographers and videographers, is a little bit of a changing of the guard, because obviously we've had CES in the semi-recent past, and it was never a photography show in and of itself, but it was often used as a platform to launch or announce or tease something photographic or videographic, and it seems to be less and less the case these days. I suppose we have CP Plus around the corner. Obviously, we have the photography and video show around the corner as well, but it sort of feels like you say, the early part of the year does feel like it's being cannibalized these days by that rush to sort of get rid of the stock before we push out the new stuff.
Yes, indeed. Well, I was at CES a couple of weeks ago myself, which is partly why my voice is, I'm not going to lie, a little bit tired, a little bit hoarse today. My body is certainly in recovery mode. But the big camera brands were certainly out there. They certainly had a big presence. I had to walk around the Nikon stand. I had to walk around the Canon stand. Sony was there, fitting photography, I think, into other parts of its ecosystem as well. And then at the more emerging side of photography and imaging, at some of the newcomer and smaller brand events, I had some hands-on with the Unistellar Odyssey Pro gear as well. They weren't the only ones there. Veronis as well, showing off some of their telescope gear. So, yeah, CES, obviously, everyone is fighting for airtime at an event like that. So I can quite understand how brands, if they're choosing, particularly where there are more industry-specific events, they might choose to launch their products either in their own right at their own events or as part of those other events where there's maybe less noise, maybe less competition. There is still lots of new stuff for us to talk about. And as we say, the news train is travelling at full steam. Announcements across lots of different lines. And James, you are our news conductor today. Should we start by checking the tickets in the first class carriages, perhaps? Because first class carriages look quite busy today. Who's sitting up there, right at the front?
Well, if we look at the best dressed gentleman on this particular express, that'll be the Swedish chap rocking the new Hasselblad 907X and CFV 100C. So there is a new Hasselblad camera, more specifically a new Hasselblad camera back. So the CFV 100C is specifically the digital camera back. That now comes in a delicious 100 megapixel flavor. So the 907X was the existing, to call it a camera might be a little bit generous. It is more of an interface between the camera back and between the lens system. And for those who are unfamiliar with the way modular cameras work, this is kind of, if you go back to the pre-digital age, to the film day, so lots of people are familiar with like the Hasselblad 500C, that's like an iconic old medium format film camera. You have the body itself of the camera, and it has a back. So you could have a Polaroid back or an 8x10 back or, whatever. That would be where the film goes, attaches to the body, and then obviously a lens attaches to the other end of the body. So you've got this sort of three-part system, and that's what we have these days. So the 907X is the body, if you like, even though these days it's about, it's a few millimeters thick. It's very, very thin. The digital back that plugs in, that has the image sensor and all the clever stuff and the LCD screen on the back, and then the lens goes on the front. So it's taking that old vintage, historic, classic tradition of the way modular medium format cameras used to work and translating it to the modern day. And yes, so we have a very tasty 100 megapixel camera designed much like, so Hasselblad has two different kind of systems. It has the X system, which is it's more of a conventional mirrorless camera. It looks like a thick DSLR, a bit more stylish than a DSLR, but a thick DSLR body with a viewfinder and a screen and buttons and all that sort of stuff, a shutter button. Then you've got the 907X, which looks more like the old film body. It doesn't have an EVF. It has a tilting screen on the back, which it tilts to about 40 or 90 degrees. The idea being you use it like a waist level finder. So those of us of a certain age will love sort of having this thing at waist level, looking down, being very considered about composing our scene and looking at compositional interest and all that sort of stuff. And just really enjoying that process. And that's what Hasselblad kind of is all about. It's not about sort of fire and forget, take a million frames, blah, 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 blah. It's not even a video-oriented body. In fact, it has no video capability whatsoever, which in these days might seem strange. Why would a premium 100 megapixel camera that costs, what is it, David, in the region of $8 or $9,000, something like that?
Yes, so I've got the US dollar prices here. That's $8,199 I've seen. Plus, if you want to buy the optical viewfinder, that's an additional $499.
So with that kind of price tag, it may seem strange to those who are not invested in medium format or traditional camera systems to say, hey, why doesn't this have video? Even my phone does video. And that's actually kind of the point. This is not a system that's intended to be used on a gimbal or to be done for vlogging or, stick on a Gorilla Pod and film yourself doing stuff. That's not what this camera's for. And with the previous, with the 50 megapixel Hasselblads that came out, actually, the cameras were released with a video function that didn't actually work for about 6 to 8 months after launch.
That's extraordinary. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, you would press the video function and a little message would come up saying function not available. And they firmwared it in at a later stage. But I think, apart from folks like myself going, you know what, that's quite an expensive camera. It feels a bit strange for that function not to be included at launch. So between that and the fact that actually nobody's using that camera for video, I quite admire the idea of being, having your convictions and saying, this is a really serious piece of photography kit. Let's not fiddle about and talk about 4K, 8K, whatever else, because nobody's buying this for that purpose. This is a camera intended for still life, for portraiture, for landscapes, part of the new digital back. So it has a 100 megapixel sensor, as the Hasselblad X2D did before it. It also has phase detect autofocus, which if you've used a previous Hasselblad medium format mirrorless camera, you'll be very thankful that the phase detect is in there, because the contrast detect was a little bit creaky on the old system. But now it's got fairly reliable face detect. It's nice and snappy. It's a gloriously designed piece of kit, as you might imagine, of a Hasselblad device. And the files, I truly, sincerely, genuinely believe that Hasselblad has the best color science in the business.
Yes, and they talk about that with the release as well, don't they? About the color science specifically being truer to life here than maybe in any of the previous Hasselblad cameras.
Absolutely, and we famously, certainly YouTubers will talk about Canon having the best color science. Fuji users will talk about the color science of Fujifilm, and Fujifilm is I would say is probably the second when it comes to that second best. Look at the GFX cameras. So we talk about digital medium format. There's 3 players. There's Phase 1, which are the kind of 20 grand big boy cameras. Far too expensive for the likes of you and me, or certainly for me, David. Then you have Fujifilm and Hasselblad. And the real difference here is going to get really, really geeky on you all. So digital medium format is actually not true medium format. So a digital medium format sensor is a bit smaller than an actual medium format film would be, which not
I didn't know this at all. This is news to me. I don't get to sit in first class often enough.
Looking over the Swedish man's shoulder in the front of the train. Yes, so it's sort of digital medium format is a little bit like APS-C compared to full frame in those terms. Right. Those sensors are still bigger than 35mm full frame sensors, but yes, the purists will be quick to remind you that they're not real medium format. But it's all much of a much these days. If you've got a camera that's shooting gigantic 100 megapixel files, you're still doing pretty good for yourself.
Now, It used to be that smartphone cameras were consigned to the cheap seats right at the back of the train, but Samsung is making an argument that that should no longer be the case. And its latest lineup, announced also in January, it's been staking its claim for some first-class treatment too, hasn't it, James? In quite a spectacular way, I have to say.
It has, and I think these days, I think anyone listening to this podcast and most people who sort of, have a smartphone in general these days will be aware of just how clever, just how accomplished, just how capable our phones are. And we do seem to have reached this tipping point. It certainly felt this way with the most recent Google Pixel, and no doubt the next Google Pixel, and most definitely with the new Samsung. So it has one new camera module. Aside from that, the improvements are pretty much all based on AI, which lends to a very, a provocative conversation on how much AI is welcome or helpful or intrusive when it comes to photography. But nonetheless, the stuff that the Samsung S24 series can do with AI is really clever. And it's, I wonder now, are we reaching this tipping point where hardware is kind of less important than the software? And if that being the case, can they firmware the S23 and make that just as clever? But that notwithstanding, the S24 can do some very, very clever computational stuff with AI in terms of video editing as well, not just stills. It can do clever things in terms of object moving and resizing with video as well as stills. As I mentioned, it replaced the old 10 times zoom with a 5 times zoom module, which some people got a little bit upset about. But because the 5 times zoom module actually has a superior sensor, so combining that 5 times zoom module with a superior sensor and some clever AI, it can actually accomplish the 10 times zoom with superior quality to the previous one. So again, what may seem like a technological downgrade is kind of made up for with an AI and a software-based upgrade. So this is just a really fascinating time to be looking at imaging. I don't think we're there with conventional cameras yet, where the software, the firmware can make up for last year's tech in this year's camera. But certainly that feels like a thing now. Are we reaching, this is kind of, we've plateaued with what the sensors and the lenses in smartphones can do, but they are so much more clever and capable with software. It will be interesting to see what Apple does next, because Apple has never been one to join this megapixel race. The Samsung S24 has a 200 megapixel sensor. It can shoot 8K. Those aren't things Apple has really been interested in. They've been happy with a 12 megapixel, 48 megapixel sensor. They're not really on that arms race that we've seen in digital cameras a long time ago. It was always thinking, well, this camera has more megapixels. Well, now maybe the megapixel count isn't as important as how clever's your AI. And this feels like a place where Samsung's very, very deeply involved with Google. That was a big part of the presentation as well. Is that more important than the cameras themselves? And that's a big question. I don't know the answer.
I mean, if we just abstract specifically from AI and talk about computational photography, then that's certainly a journey we've been on for a few years now. And you look at how Apple versus how Google or Samsung market the camera and the imaging capabilities in their devices, it is fundamentally different. Apple very rarely mentions AI, it seems. It almost goes out of its way not to talk about these things. It wants it all to be seamless. It wants it all just to work, to be part of the experience. And, you will see the images have, that they talk about the image pipeline in the image signal processor in there. They talk about all the different bits of processing, but that is completely hidden from you as the user, unless you really, really want to dive in or use some bespoke apps. But when you start looking at what Google talks about when it launches its Pixel phones, and then Samsung, it's all about the AI. We're seeing two ends of a spectrum here of different ways to go to market with this technology. So AI clearly has been the buzz phrase over the last 18 or so months, and Samsung has leapt onto that. But when you mention a few of the capabilities there, notwithstanding the 200 megapixel sensor, I mean, let's not forget that. That is a 200 megapixel sensor on the S24 Ultra, along with a handful of others, including digital zoom up to 100 times. Yeah, whatever. A space zoom up to 100 times. Let's see how the moon shots come out with this one, and how much AI has gone into making those. But it's some of the more useful applications of this. So, for example, on last month's podcast, we were chatting with amazing urban photographer and Nikon partner Ben Moore. I love Ben's work, really, really love his work. And the gadget that he talked about was this kind of sock, this hood that goes over your camera when you're shooting through glass windows from the top of tall buildings, for example, to kill those reflections. Well, something that Samsung spoke about in the Samsung photo editing application was using AI to remove reflections on shots that were taken through a window. I love that, absolutely love that, and that would make a real discernible difference to the images that you take. Also, straighten out images, particularly, sometimes I'm actually pretty good, even with a smartphone, without any level enabled, at taking what I think is a horizon true image, at least when I'm trying to do that deliberately. But sometimes it's not quite right. But what the AI capabilities here will do is automatically straighten out and use generative fill, generative expand, I guess, if we're looking at it in Photoshop terms, just to fill in the gaps that you might get through straightening out an image. I think that sort of stuff, particularly the more transparent it becomes to users, is where we really start to see the value of AI. Let's head towards the middle of the train now, James, with a new announcement from an outfit formerly known as Olympus. They brought something out that's brand spanking new. This is pretty much hot off the press, isn't it?
Absolutely. So announced just yesterday is the new flagship camera, the OM system OM-1 Mark II. And when I say new, there will be some folks who bristle about that a bit, because in a lot of ways, the Mark II OM-1 is very similar to the Mark I OM-1. Funny, we've been talking about AI because that's really where a lot of the magic is. So, you're still getting a very similar 20.4 megapixel sensor, a lot of the computational cleverness that the OM-1 was known and loved for, rock solid stabilization, great form factor. We've talked, all the things that people either love or hate about Micro Four Thirds. I'm a big lover of Micro Four Thirds, so it's something that I really enjoy. The big improvements to me, again, AI based. The first one I was always surprised by, the image stabilization has been improved algorithmically. So they haven't changed the mechanics, it's algorithmically. So now we're talking about an 8.5 stops of compensation, which is best in market. So there's a number of other systems that can do 8 stops. Well, the OM system, OM-1 Mark II, can do 8.5 stops, which is, if you're somebody who shoots video or shoots handheld, shoots low light photography, shoots with long lenses, any extra stops of compensation are really, really useful. But to me, it's just very clever they can do that with algorithm, not just mechanics.
I'll just stop you there. For me, that starts to raise alarm bells. That's the similar sort of thing in my head. If it's algorithmic, I'm thinking, oh no, is that similar to digital zoom versus optical zoom? How can an algorithm improve what might be a kind of physical wobble? Do you know what I mean? What's the compromise there? Or is there not one? Are the algorithms really so smart that they're able to make it imperceptible?
That's a really good question, and one to which we don't have an answer. I can sort of take a cue from the Nikons, and I want to say it was the Nikon ZF that introduced Nikon's version. Again, I'm not saying they're the same technologies. Nikon has, it's called vibration reduction focus or something to that effect. And it uses, so Nikon calls image stabilization VR, vibration reduction. And it uses your focus point to inform the stabilization.
Okay.
Now, in terms of science, I'm too dumb to know what that actually does. But for example, if it knew you were focusing on a certain object at a certain focal length, at a certain shutter speed, it may be able to compensate. For example, if we're shooting across a long field and I'm focusing on the cow at the far end of the field, not the tree at the front of it, it would require a different kind of compensation.
Yes.
So I think it's using that kind of information. So not just trying to embellish what's already there with a bit of, let's say, electronic stabilization. It's maybe using your focus point and some more authentic data to inform how it stabilizes. What kind of lens is it? Is it a long lens that's nose heavy? Okay, it's using that. You're focusing in the mid ground here, so it's going to do some clever maths like that. That's my summation. Maybe completely off point there. When I get to speak to OM System next, I will certainly be asking them about that. But again, the fact that, as we were just saying, AI can be so clever now. It can do things, the hardware can be very similar, but the AI can be very different. Another thing I really love about the OM system, OM-1 Mark II, It's funny, Olympus always had a reputation for having these very long product names. OM is now going to get into the same kind of ballpark. We have, previously the company introduced live ND filters. So this was like a software simulation of an ND filter. So the filter you put on the front of your lens to sort of shoot in harsh lighting conditions. If you wanted to shoot waterfalls with kind of that dreamy flowing effect, or waves that were kind of not crashing, they're not frozen, they're in this sort of streamy sort of deliciously creamy sort of look.
So if you had a slow shutter speed but didn't want to overexpose.
Exactly that. So you'd have a physical ND filter. So that Olympus introduced, or OM introduced, a software-based version of that you might think, oh, that sounds like it's going to be a gimmick and really bad. It was actually really great. It was a little bit limited, but it was really, really great. And now, so that software itself has an extra stop of simulated ND, so you can shoot with a bit harsher light. But as a kind of graduation of that principle, there is now live grad filters as well. So you can shoot, for example, let's say you're shooting a mountain sort of at an angle, and you've got the harsh light behind it, and you want to sort of have a graduated filter across. You can now sort of select a line across the screen and drag with your finger, where you want
I love that.
the graduation or the gradation to be on your image, which, again, it seems like one of those ideas. You see the teaser video, you see people talk about it, you think that's a gimmick, it's never going to work that well. It turns out it actually works pretty blooming well. And whether it will truly replace grad filters, physical grad filters, that's another conversation. Will it be something that when you've got this camera with you and a moment presents itself, and you didn't bring all your kit, but there's a fantastic shot there, and you can either use the software or you can miss the shot? Well, to be honest, I'll use the software, I'll take the shot. And it turns out, this has been in the hands of a lot of ambassadors trying this new kit, and they're saying, actually, this is serious. This is a really potentially game-changing bit of stuff where now, yes, everyone's first choice is going to be to have real NDs, real grad filters. But we're getting to the point now where this stuff can be built in. It can be software, it can be AI-driven. And like I say, that makes a difference between you and I. We've got a camera with us, but we didn't bring all the gear. Now we can get a shot we may never have been able to get before, which to me is really exciting.
Love the sound of that. So that's the OM system, OM-1. Mark II.
Mark II, yes.
Price point, availability, do we have any news on those?
Yes, we do. So the camera is available for pre-order as we speak. And certainly price in the UK is 2,699, so 2,700 quid.
Proper money still.
It's proper money. And again, there's a lot of prejudice against Micro Four Thirds as a system, as a standard. And you're either going to be a believer in this kit or you're not. To give my version of the advantages of Micro Four Thirds, and remember, this is a flagship camera. It's a professional grade camera. It's IP53 certified. This is a camera you can literally take in the pouring rain. And there are many camera systems, many camera manufacturers have weather sealing. Most of them aren't certified to IPX standards. And even some of those that do boast weather sealing, I won't single out brands, but I wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't trust them in light rain, let alone taking them into a rainforest. The OM system kit and the OM-1 in specific with this IP53 rating, I would take it into a downpour and shoot with it. Just to sort of put that price into perspective. It's a lot of cash, but you're getting a lot of camera and a lot of cleverness as well for your money.
And you've spoken on here before about having the right tool for the right job, particularly when it comes to travelling as well. And of course, we had Peter Dench on here just before Christmas talking about him taking an OM-5 to Ukraine and Odessa, and why Micro Four Thirds certainly was anything but a compromise. In fact, it was an asset. We're going to hop off the news train for just a moment as the train pulls in to Featureville. Carys Kaiser has been a camera operator and shooting producer-director for primetime TV shows in the UK. However, a recent downturn in the UK television industry has been nothing short of devastating for many who work within it. In the face of adversity, Carys has been able to diversify, rejigging her offerings to broadcast clients and taking her creativity to new heights.
So I'm Carys Kaiser and I am a drone pilot, TV camera operator, occasional shooting PD and educator.
And for those who don't necessarily work within the TV industry, a shooting PD is a shooting producer, director.
Yeah. So you are directing the show or program that you're on, but you're dealing with camera, sound, talent, presenter, contributor, junior members of staff, location, story, the shot list, the sit-down interviews, the movement, ready for somebody to take over the edit, and you'll just hand over all of that.
It's certainly a Jack or a Jacqueline of all trades job with an awful lot of responsibility. Talk to me about your present day right now. Talk to me about your work, in particular as a drone pilot, a drone videographer, a drone photographer as well.
So as a drone pilot, that is my current main source of income. For 2023, that has been the priority of where all the work has come from. It's always, can you fly a drone? Can you do this show? Can you provide these photographs? It's not an overnight success. So anyone that is thinking about getting a drone and making loads of money doing it, first of all, you don't make loads of money doing it. And secondly, it's not an overnight success. It's a long game. It's learning the craft. It's making contacts. It's working with people that become friends within the industry. It's a wide-ranging subject, so you can go off on a little tangent and make some money doing something else, but is with a drone. So sometimes, occasionally, I go off and doing 3D mapping, and I'll collect the data, and that's basically just photographs in a sequence. But that can boost my income for a month, because it's all a sum of parts. So yeah, that's my main source of income, but it's taken a long time to get to that point. And then I'll do photography, and then within that I'll do photographic projects, which then I'll end up with an exhibition as a photographer. So it's kind of like, it's an odd thing really, because it's ever evolving. It's not just about the technical and the law, but it's about how can you use this drone creatively.
I want to come on to the photography piece in a moment, because I think that's really interesting. But in terms of the drone industry taking off, it certainly has been something that we've seen over the last 10 years or so. And I think it's easy to see why in some regards, because a drone shot in a piece of video, whether that's for TV or for a corporate or whatever, it instantly adds some production value, doesn't it? And it's cheaper than what the alternative was before, which was to pop a big helicopter or even just a platform for a temporary aerial shot. So I can see where the growth in this industry has really come from. And for the video work that you do, you mentioned some surveying work, which I think is interesting as well. But I noticed from your credits, there's a lot of broadcast in there for sure.
Yeah, so broadcast TV is where I've ended up with a lot of bookings, and it's all sorts of documentaries. And what's happening is that people are starting to use them in a more creative way. So I did a documentary, and it was about a murder trial. What they wanted to do is have the drone with the sort of like what I call a top-down bird's eye view, so that they could use that as an overlay with graphics to show what happened. So sometimes you end up working on things that are quite dark, but you don't think about that. You're just thinking about what is that shot. You've got your director with you looking over your shoulder and saying, yes, that's exactly what I want to see when I get to the edit. I'll be trusted by a production company. I won't even meet these people. I'll have a Zoom call. They'll talk to me about what they want. And then I'll go for 2 days, 5 days, whatever, and just get loads of drone shots, variety of drone shots for the titles and throughout a 6-part series. So they might say, well, these characters are going to, it could be an observational documentary where they say, well, these characters are going to go in and out of work and we need things to break it up. So we don't see the characters, and I might go off and film it. They won't be there. But so that happens quite a lot for me, which is interesting, because what used to happen and still does, you get booked as a drone operator and you film things as they're filming their sequences through the weeks. But what's happening more and more for me is that I just get booked by a production company. They'll come to the end of the shoot, so they know what sort of drones they want, and we'll say, 2 days, you, an assistant, go out in a van, get all of this. We want some of Bury, we want some Bolton, we want centre of Manchester, we want this, we want that. And I think the invention of the mini drones and the law changing to this sub 250 gram drone, which are these small, they look like toys, those have really opened up my storytelling ability. So I can fly in the centre of a city and capture things, whereas I might have had in the past have cordons, road closures and all of this kind of thing. But the law says that, you can fly. It's just that from an insurance perspective and a production expectation is that you still have a qualification. You could say, well, drone operator as a job is done then. But it's not, because, as I say, production companies won't take a risk and say, oh yeah, we just because their insurance won't allow them to do that.
Could you summarise what the requirements are in order to fly a drone? So let's say I'm a creator or a professional, or someone has asked me for this thing, could you just get a quick aerial shot of the city centre or of the landscape or whatever it is? What would I need to know in order to know whether I can just go out and buy a small drone and do that, or whether I need to have some other qualification or some other insurance to do this ethically, legally?
Okay, if you have a mini drone, which is 249 grams or under, the law is quite different from if you have a bigger drone. So that's why the popularity of mini drones is great. For that, for anybody, what they need to do is register that drone with using an operator ID, and it's around £10 with the CAA, which is a Civil Aviation Authority, who govern drones and aviation in this country. And then you also need to do a flyer ID, which is a basic type of training and quiz online, again, run by the CAA, so the Civil Aviation Authority has all of this on their website, and that will give you the basic requirements. Now, the reason that you need to have the operator ID is because you've got a camera. If the drone doesn't have a camera, then you don't need an operator ID. But people will argue with me but if you actually read the small print, that's what it says. And if you're going to be using it in a professional capacity in any way, you need that. And then also you need insurance. And then after that, what you need to do is start to look at, how and where you're going to fly that.
Yes.
And if you don't have any training, how do you know that you can't fly in certain parts of London? What will happen is the geofencing on the drone should alert you. However, DJI have sort of lessened that recently in this upgrade that's taken place, which means it's not flagging. How many people go walking in the Lake District and then say there was this great big jet and they fly low and they come fast? There are areas where drones are just kind of like blanket ban, and you need to make provision. So if I'm booked by a production company, I'll spend time and I'll get in touch and I'll ask for permission, or I'll flag up to the low level flying number. I'm going to be here at this time flying a drone, and then usually they avoid that area. So there's lots of things, but mini drones are a brilliant tool. They're cheap, and you can get the money back on it quite quickly. But it's just being aware that what you need to do for that.
What's the compromise there with the mini drone? Obviously, it's got a smaller payload in there, but is the quality of cameras that they can carry, has it developed to the stage where it is perfectly adequate for the majority of broadcast and content creation jobs?
There is a compromise with the camera. The cameras are getting better and better, but there is a slight compromise on that camera. I can tell a shot when I watch TV, that's a mini drone, and not because of the area. Sometimes they're difficult to control the shutter speed. So I worked on the latest series of Canal Boat Diaries. It was the best week of my career for a long time, because it's such a lovely show to work on. Talking about multi-roles, Robbie Cummings, who is, on the boat, it's his boat, it's his home.
I've spoken with Robbie before. He's terrific, so knowledgeable, and such an interesting guy.
It is, and they welcomed me in because their drone operator Phil was other eyes tied up, so I did a cover. Because we're in the centre of Birmingham and we're on the side of canals, we can't really get the bigger drone out. We needed to use a smaller drone, and you could see where you're trying to control the aperture and the shutter with the shutter speed and everything. There's a compromise. And when I watch those programs go out, you can see that little lag. But if I went to something that's a bit more high end and then I tried to use that mini drone, it's not going to measure up. So it's all to do with the different production values and wind. just to put a finer point on it, that mini drone, the wobble, now the gimbals are great, but there's a point when actually you need that more powerful drone, which would be, for me, I would go to the Mavic 3 series for the next step up. But you need a greater qualification, more risk assessment, and also you're bound a little bit more about where you can take off.
And you are also going to be talking about drones at the photography and video show in March as well. I see there's a couple of sessions here talking about mini drone adventures and also the language of drones too.
So mini drones, I'm going to feature about what the adventure can look like without doing a qualification, how you get the best out of that mini drone, what you need to be looking for. I suppose I was inspired when I went to the Outer Hebrides and I saw this guy with a mini drone and he just flew it up and down. And I thought, you've had a lot of fun, but you've missed an awful lot of things that you could have done, and you could have a really good adventure and a little film at home to show or on your social media. So that's what that's about. And then the next one is about the language of drones. So as a camera operator or a videographer, we have a lot of terminology. Medium close-up, GV, so general view, we've got all of that. But we don't have that language when we're flying a drone. So I run this course that is quite in-depth with TV directors and executives or storytellers, and I show them what we could talk about and how we can communicate. Sometimes what happens is when you start working with somebody new, they know what they want as a director or a producer, and you know where you can give it to them. But there's this like disparity between, I'll get things like, could you do me the spinny? I don't know what that means. So if we all had the language accessible, we wouldn't be as much kind of like miscommunication. So it's all about the language of drones, and then how we're going to apply that to our shoots. So, and then also looking at, when's a drone shot just a drone shot? Because now we've talked about drones. Oh, everybody's got one and everyone's using one. I'm seeing now drone shots just for drone shots' sake. It's just another angle. But a drone shot to me should be quite special. And it's kind of like in the storytelling, it's giving you that, it might be a breath, a pause. If you're watching a really good series, hard documentaries, the drone shot is that moment of a pause, and it might be for voiceover, or it could just be a little bit of silence, and then you've got that little bit of a moment, and it's part of the punctuation of storytelling. So that's, a long way of going on about how I'm going to talk about the language of drones.
It's like any shot in a video sequence, really, isn't it? It needs to be, or in an edit, it needs to be motivated. There needs to be a reason for it to be there, not just, we've just got 5 seconds to cover this thing, let's slap a drone shot in there. That's often when it either won't work, the grammar of it, the convention won't work, or you're wasting an opportunity. And I think that insight that you share there about a drone shot being a moment, a pause perhaps, or just a punctuation point, I think that's really interesting. That sounds like a fascinating session that you have at the show there. There's one thing I just want to land back on before we wrap up though, Carys. You mentioned not only the TV production, video production, but also the photography element as well. And just looking around your website, I see some beautiful photographic images that look very clearly as though they've been taken with drones as well. What can you tell us about that project?
I have a continual project called A Girl From Above. What happened with that was I'm doing loads of video. I see lots of people on Instagram with lots of photographs, and photographs on Instagram were the main thing then. And I was like, well, I could do some landscape. So I did some landscape, and they were like, yeah, they're nice. And then I just took a photograph of a friend lying down, and I was like, oh. And she said, I hate pictures of myself. And she looked at them and she was like, I really like these. And then this creative spark started to go, what happens if I tell stories, or I get people that don't like having pictures taken of themselves? Then it got picked up by a couple of blogs and things. And at the time, nobody was really taking photographs of people with drones in different scenarios. And then that has now become very popular. I'm not saying I invented it, because people were tagging me in pictures. Have you seen this? They're doing your thing. And I'm like, no, that's not my thing. We all started to go, oh, what can we do with these drones? So I started that project. And then I've got like other little projects that I'm constantly thinking about. How could I use this drone different in a stills capacity. And then that led to actually me getting some work doing industrial building photography, where I work for somebody and they take them, they process the pictures. And what he does between me taking that photograph and him doing the edit is like amazing. But yeah, so I'm always doing things with a drone in a photography way. I mean, for me, in the 10 years I've been flying, I never get bored of seeing drone shots, whether they're stills or video, because to me, it's so exciting.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
No, thank you, David.
And you can catch up with Carys at the Photography and Video Show, talking about her adventures with mini drones, the language of drones, and about women in the film business. We've also put a link to her website in the show notes.
Rightio, James, let's jump back onto the news train. And it's very easy for some of us, particularly those of us in the media, to get excited about the flagship cameras, those with the biggest specs, biggest price tags. But the reality, as both you and I know, is that for the camera buying public, those flagship cameras aren't necessarily the biggest sellers. Now, you guys have found some data, haven't you, on 2023's best-selling cameras in Japan. And there were some, I don't know, maybe surprises, maybe not surprises, but certainly some interesting observations in there, I think it's fair to say. So tell me where this data comes from, and maybe we can just take a look through this list of the top 10 selling cameras there and just consider what intel we can draw from it.
Absolutely. So this is data that comes from BCN Retail in Japan. And sort of give a shorthand of what that is. It's an organization in Japan, it's a retail organization that aggregates sales from Japanese retail. Now, once upon a time, it covered something like 80% of Japanese retail. Nowadays, it's probably 50 to 60%. But it is specifically the big electronic specialists and the big camera specialists that this data comes from. So it kind of excludes or doesn't take into account smaller independents, or the Japanese equivalent of a mom and pop shop, if you like.
Yeah.
But it would be the equivalent in the US of saying it's aggregating sales from B&H and Adorama, or in the UK of saying it's someone who looks at Wex, Park cameras. It's pretty much authentic to what the general behavior is. But yes, as you say, the data, the 10 best-selling cameras in Japan of last year. On DCW, I'm asked a lot, no doubt you are as well, what's the best camera? Well, the question we really need to ask is, what's the best camera for me or for you, or whoever's asking that question? So you and I might get most excited by flagships and, 100 megapixel Hasselblads and this, that, and the other, cameras that shoot 120 frames a second. Most folks don't need that. And for most folks, that's overkill. It's needless. It's pointless. They need something that's a little bit more utilitarian, maybe a bit more straightforward. So what are the 10 best-selling cameras? Well, surprisingly, perhaps not surprisingly, there are no flagship cameras in this list whatsoever. What there are an abundance of are vlogging cameras, entry-level cameras. There's quite a few retro-styled cameras as well.
Yes.
This is something that's becoming an increasing, I don't want to say genre, an increasing segment of the camera industry is cameras that specifically look cool. They take good images as well, but kind of, first and foremost, they are designed to be aesthetically pleasing. So we started, let's do reverse order, let's do a countdown. So the 10th best-selling camera was the Sony a7 IV. And
Which
that is,
I would say, the highest-end camera on this entire list.
Absolutely. It's the most advanced, quote-unquote. It's the most, the most exciting in technological terms, and it's the least popular of this list, the Sony a7 IV.
Is it the only full frame on the list?
It is the only full frame,
okay,
yes.
Yeah.
The rest of the list is APS-C and quite a few Micro Four Thirds, as I've just been sort of proselytizing. And that's the next camera. So number 9 and number 8. We've got two Olympus cameras, two Micro Four Thirds bodies. Number 9 is the EM10 Mark IV. That's the kind of an SLR-styled retro-looking camera. It's a beginner camera, or it's one that you might give to somebody who wants their first mirrorless camera, who wants to learn, understand photography. So again, entry level. Below that, at number 8, it's the Olympus Pen EPL10. And this camera was released, gosh, I can't even remember how many years ago. It's probably going back to 2019, possibly. It's an older camera. But yeah, again, entry level, vlogging, blogging style camera, lifestyle camera. In Asia, there's definitely a market. I can't remember the Japanese name for it. It's aimed at teenage girls, early 20s, sort of people who are fashionistas, I suppose we'd call them over here, sort of it girls, if you like. And these kind of cameras are very popular with that segment of the market. Below that, at number 7, the Nikon ZFC. Again, a retro camera, an intentionally throwback-looking. So I've sort of comedically called them past hipster cameras because they're very stylish and snazzy. Very capable APS-C camera, but again, an APS-C camera. Doesn't do anything game-changing, but it looks great. Below that, another Olympus Pen EP7. That's my daily drive. I actually have mine with me at this very moment. Okay. I love this camera. It's a little body, again, another retro-styled body, micro four thirds, 20 megapixel sensor. Doesn't do anything super exciting. It's just little and great. Below that, at number 5, it's the Canon EOS M50 Mark II. So, as you may remember, David, this is the EOS M system that Canon killed off unceremoniously last year.
I mean, still a stonkingly good camera. I was genuinely surprised to see this in the list, particularly as you say, that it's just been killed off by Canon.
It's just been killed off. You know, it's very easy to say, well, you know, that's a dead system. Let's write it off. But honestly, if you look at the ecosystem of lenses for that camera, it doesn't need any more lenses than exist. It's decently supported by Canon. It's widely supported by third parties. So you've got EOS M as a product line no longer exists. Well, guess what? That means there's a load of great bargains to be had. And it's got a complete, fully fleshed out lens system. So if you want a small pocketable camera with a load of great lenses, you can also use your Canon EF lenses on it as well. So if you're looking for a bargain, that's a great thing to do. But you know, even without that taken into account, the EOS M50 Mark II was the most recent of that line. And it was, you know, the 5th best-selling camera in Japan last year.
Yeah. Arguably, would you say that the two cameras that come in at number 4 and number 3, also Canon cameras, are maybe what Canon would be pushing you towards instead of the M50?
Absolutely, yes. So the EOS R50 at number 3 is the direct replacement for the M50. So very similar, in fact, almost the same dimensions and body size. It's the lenses that are slightly bigger because on the RF mount, without getting too convoluted, Canon's RF mount is APS-C and full frame. So even though the lenses will be inherently smaller, they do have to fit a full frame, cover the full frame image size. So they are slightly bigger than the EOS M. But yes, so the EOS R50 and at number 4, the R10.
I mean, some would say that Canon might feel justified, despite the fact that the M50 Mark II appears in the list. It might feel justified at having sunset the M line, given that the R50 and the R10 rank above it still.
Yes, absolutely, and I think it's an interesting because you know Canon launched its new mirrorless system, the EOS R/the RF mount system, back in 2018, and at the time, if you listened to the journalists, if you listened to the geeks, if you listened to the Reddit people, the really passionate, knowledgeable, enthusiastic folks, they would say, "Oh, this is instant death for EOS M. You know, that system's completely redundant." And here we are, all these years later, and that the EOS M system is still selling well, which kind of speaks to that fact that hey, as exciting as new cameras are and advanced cameras are, they're not the be-all and end-all. They just really aren't. There's life beyond what's new and shiny. We look at what's at number 2. It's the Sony A6400. Again, another APS-C system and a lot of life in it, as we see here. And what's really, to me, I'm kind of surprised and not surprised at the same time. At number 1 is the Sony ZV-E10. And this is Sony's new line. They're called Vlogcam in Japan. That's how they're branded. But here they are vlogging cameras, just Z vlogging cameras, specifically aimed at the influencer generation, the content creation crowd. If somebody says to me, what camera do I get to be a YouTuber? I'd probably point them to one of the ZV cameras. And the ZV-E10 is, you know, as we see, the most popular one here. And there's been an interesting shift over the last couple of years where the comment for a while was, oh, where are the beginner cameras? Where are the cheap and cheerful? Where are the starter? Well, the market behavior, what we had once considered to be beginner cameras, that segment has now been filled by vlogging cameras because increasingly beginners, what we would call beginners or newcomers, maybe more accurately these days, are people who want to get into vlogging, not necessarily into photography or hybrid shooting. So I think this is a real marking, a changing of the guard here, that the most popular camera in Japan, you know, the home state of all of the big camera manufacturers, the best-selling camera was a vlogging camera, not a super advanced one at that. You know, there are other vlogging and video devices that are much more clever than this camera, but it does the job. Decent price point, very capable, nice and small. What more do you need? And it's just a reminder to us all, 100 megapixel cameras, 120 frames per second cameras, all well and good. Yeah. What do people need? What are they buying? And I think this is a bit of an eye-opener for a lot of people.
And maybe that goes some way to justifying the releases that we saw in 2023 from Sony. It seemed as though every month there was a new camera that fitted into this vlogger sphere, whether it's the ZV-E10, which I think came out in late 22, or the ZV-E1, which that was the full frame.
I believe that's yes.
I have to look this up every time. I think the E10 was the APS-C. Yes, the E10 was the APS-C and the E1 was the full frame, but they're both the interchangeable lens cameras.
Yes, and I think the last time I was on the show, I even made the same remark about another. Sony's naming conventions are very confusing. It's one of the criticisms I have of the system. If you're a newcomer, it's an alphabet soup of which model you want. You kind of need someone to send you a link, and you click on that and you buy that one. But trying to recommend them based on the name alone is quite tricky. But despite this alphabet soup of model names and model numbers, we have, this system that's not brand new. Indeed, the ZV-E10 Mark II is rumored to be announced at some point this year. Maybe at CP+, maybe we'll see it in March at the Photography and Video Show. But yes, so it's not even brand new. Again, there are many cameras with much more firepower, much cleverer, but this is what's selling the most. And yeah, it's a change. I think there's a real changing of the guard. I think the next couple of years, we're going to see more and more of these vlogging devices. And yeah, to your point, David, Sony has really doubled down on this. And there was some statistic last year where, vlogging cameras made up something crazy like 60% of Sony's sales.
Yes. And finally, on our February train journey, let's visit the guard's van at the back. And, well, take a look. If you just lift up that suitcase and just pull that coat out of the way, you'll see this little box there with some bricks in it. And, well, I don't know if you were expecting to see this, but Lego has just released its Lego Polaroid one-step SX70 camera. Yes, you can build a Polaroid camera out of Lego. It's got 516 pieces. It includes an optical viewfinder. It's got a film package containing not one, not two, but 3 photos. It's even got an exposure compensation dial. And, yep, just looking on the corner there, it's got a little price tag of $80. Now, I should say this isn't real film that this camera takes, and it doesn't churn out real photos. Well, they are photos, but they're not photos that you've just, from exposures you've just captured. But the shutter release button does release one of these photos, and they are beautiful, blocky bits of art, including one of the Polaroid founder. I think this is a lovely, lovely gift as a birthday present, Mother's Day gift, Father's Day gift, whatever. And it's all come out of something called Lego Ideas, where the Lego building public, which includes me, can share ideas for new builds and people can vote on their favourites. And it becomes a bit of a crowdsourcing thing and a popularity thing. But ultimately, the best ideas can become real products and actual things that people can buy. That's where this came out of. And looking on the website, I can see that there is a Sony Walkman up there as well that's doing particularly well. I don't know if this floats your boat or not. I know you love a bit of the old instant camera action, but James, if you could build any camera out of Lego, what would it be?
You know what? I'm as we've probably alluded to here. I'm a big Olympus/OM system person, and I'd love a Lego OM-1, classic film OM-1, not the modern mirrorless one. But I would love an old. And that's what I love about this Lego Ideas platform, because we've certainly covered them on Digital Camera World a few times, the different pitches there have been over the years. Can we have a Lego Leica? Can we have a Lego Pentax K1? We have a Lego this, that, or the other. And I think this one, I was going to say colourful. It's literally very colourful, this product, but it's one of the more colourful instant camera Polaroid. It's a brand everyone knows. It's very gratifying. You've got these 3 prints that pop out, or I should say prints in air quotes that pop out, including one of Edwin Land, the inventor, the founder of Polaroid. And it's just a brilliant thing. I think you mentioned it. This would be a great gift for a father on Father's Day, or a great gift for... This is one of those things. Every Christmas on the website, we have a little bit of a wrestling match. What's a great gift for photographers? Because, buying a gift for photographers is a really blooming difficult thing to do, because photographers really want lenses and cameras. We don't want mugs shaped like camera lenses and things. But this is a great gift for a photographer. This is, it's $80, which... It's not cheap, but it's not expensive as photography stuff goes. It can sit on your camera shelf, put it together with your kids, have a nice play with it. I would be all over this. Also, the Sony Walkman as well. I would be, that would be next in my shopping cart.
And it'd be nice if that did work, if it was functional, even in some limited way. But hey, let's see. I was thinking about what camera I would build. And, I come from more of a video background, and I think it would be one of two cameras. So one of them would be the JVC GRC1, which is a VHS-C.
VHS-C, yes.
It's a shoulder-mounted camera, I think from 1984, as seen in Back to the Future. Marty McFly films Doc Brown on this beautifully coloured shoulder-mounted camera. And I think it also, I know it also got a bit of a revival in Stranger Things, which makes it instantly cool to my kids now. Or equally iconic, I would argue, though I don't know about film references to this one, it's the RCA VHS camcorder, which again is a thing of beauty. Either of those, I think. And honestly, I would want them in Lego to be real sized so that I can put them on my shoulder. That does up the brick count somewhat. And it might want to be the Lego Duplo, like the big bricks rather than little bricks, perhaps. Either one of those I'd be very happy to build. If you want to suggest, maybe build and suggest your own Lego model and maybe see it upvoted and end up as a real product, then ideas.lego.com is your place to go. Our train today terminates in Birmingham, rather aptly, where patiently waiting on the platform for us is Hazel Soper from the Photography and Video Show. It's been a long 18 months since the last in-person photography show back in September 2022. Talk to me about what visitors to our March 2024 show can expect to help bring them up to speed.
Doesn't really seem like 18 months. The time seems to go quicker and quicker these days, doesn't it? We're only 6 weeks out now, believe it or not. We're very excited, but very, very busy, as I'm sure you can imagine. This year we've moved back to March, and I think we're all really delighted about that, actually. We've heard across the industry, particularly from the professional side, that is a preferred time in the season of photography and video. So we're pleased to be able to bring that back to visitors as a starting point. We've got 7 different stages and theatres on the show floor this year. We've got the old favourites, so Behind the Lens, Photo Live in the new form of Photo Studio, and the studio, which is more video-based, now called the InMotion Studio. As those who have been before know, we always have a new stage, and this year our new stage is called Shoot to Inspire.
So, what's that all about?
Bit more of everything, really, a bit more of inspiration. I have to say, this year we had so many people asking to speak at the show that we have had to just do things a little bit differently. It's a wonderful place to be in. We do have the Creator Playground again. We found that resonated really well with the audience, and that's just a great area for creating content. And as you know, just practicing the skills that you've learnt. Our idea behind that was a bit more of a journey. So last year was features kind of dotted around, and this year it's much more of a start here, finish there. Really exciting theme. We've been working really hard on that. So we're also going to be working with a company called Creativity Hub Events on some interactive sets. So we'll have displays, we'll have models, there will be opportunities again for people to practice what they've learned, but also to get a bit more involved. Part of our objectives with the photography show has always been to build on that experience and make sure that people just have a really good immersive experience at the show.
When my family came to the show September 2022, my 2 young girls were particularly taken with the Creator Playground. And, well, we have a family calendar, a little bit of McClelland family secrets here. We have a family calendar that we put together all of our highlights photos from around the family. And then we send that to other family members around Christmas as Christmas presents. And not going to lie, there were more than one of the kind of full page images that were taken of us as a family in various of the setups at the Creator Playground. Just looking at some of the other stages there, of course, the Analog Showcase, analog photography, is something that we've been speaking about here on the podcast. And also, I notice on the program overview page on the website, specialist masterclasses too. What can you tell us about those?
This is something that we've brought in new this year. We wanted to bring some really high-profile speakers in who could do something that was a bit more in-depth, a bit more intimate, so a smaller kind of group experience, and really give people the opportunity to come and be with one of those high-level pros for a photo shoot or for, some editing. So we've got Julianne Cost, who's principal evangelist for Adobe. She's going to do a more in-depth editing session. We've got Farah Yavari doing a fine arts photo shoot session, and then also Kelly Brown doing a photo shoot session as well. Again, really excited about that because it's the first time we've done those specialist masterclasses. They are booking up very quickly as well.
Julianne, of course, is an absolute wizard when it comes to Adobe stuff. And Kelly, we featured here on the podcast last year, and she is incredibly inspirational in not only the work that she does, but the businesses that she's built up around that as well. And speaking of speakers, I know you are still shaping the program a few weeks out, as you say, but what can you tell us about the other professionals that you've lined up so far for this year's show?
We've got people like Scott Kelby. He actually invited himself to the show. He wanted to come so much.
He can do that, though.
I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that. We've really gone for a very wide selection across the whole creative image making industry this year. So we've got the likes of Joe Cornish, that's through Sigma Imaging, Tim Flack, who is very famous for his wildlife shots against black backgrounds. We have YouTubers like Nigel Danson and Thomas Heaton, who are both incredibly well-known photographers as well within their own right. People like Elise Swopes and Trash Hands, who are coming over from America, very well-known creators. Trash Hands doing something on architectural photography, which is really his thing. Elise is going to look at getting into content creation. I think we'd class her as one of the original influencers before the boom of influencers. So I'd be really interested to see what she says. We've got people like Geraint Radford, who is very well known for his macro. He's one of our regulars, and frankly, everyone loves him. Same with people like Gavin Hoey. We've also got new people in, like Kelly and Farah. They're both coming over from Australia, actually. A lady called Donatella Nicolini, who's coming over from Italy to do newborn and maternity. And we've got a couple on the video side, which I'm really excited about. The first is a colorist from Jean Clément's team. So Jean Clément has done a huge number of feature films, and one of his colorists is coming along to do a session with us. He unfortunately couldn't make it because he's editing something like James Bond. And we've also got a guy called Dan Thornburn, who won the Sony Feature Filmmaker Awards last year, who is a short film director. So lots and lots of people to see.
We've been very fortunate to speak to a healthy handful and a bit of speakers and guests here on the podcast as well. I mean, you mentioned a few of them there, Kelly, of course, and Ben Moore. Of course, many visitors, Hazel, come to the show with the intent of getting some hands-on time with the kit that they might well be about to buy. So what can you tell us about the brands, the exhibitors, and the retailers at the show?
So retailers, I'll start with the last question. Retailers, we've got Wex, Photo Video, London Camera Exchange, and Camera World on the show floor again. In terms of the hands-on element, I've spoken to a huge number of brands who've recently launched various kits, which they're very excited about bringing. So it will be no surprise that there will be some things there that people don't yet know about, and some tech there that people will have known about within the last 6 months, but may not have actually had a chance to get close and personal, as it were, which is really exciting. I think the manufacturers, the Lumixes and the Canons and the Sonys of the world are really packing some punch with what they're going to do at the show. Canon, for certain, they've overhauled their stand. They're taking a slightly different direction in what they're focusing on. Obviously, cameras will absolutely be their mainstay of what to see on the stand. They've got a really exciting schedule for their spotlight stage coming out. Same with Nikon. Nikon school stage schedule's nearly finished, and that will be up on our site fairly soon as well. And Nikon are doing things a little bit differently. So we're really delighted that we've got some exhibitors returning from the days of 2019. Lumix will be on the show floor. We've got Capture One coming, and that's the first time they'll have done the show. A couple of others, which I can't talk about just yet, just had Lemesca sign up, and they're bringing along the likes of Calibrite and a new brand that they're distributing called Hobo Light.
Where is it best to keep across any show developments and announcements between now and the 16th to the 19th of March?
Well, all of our announcements or latest announcements will go out on our social channels. So that's predominantly our Facebook and Instagram. We do also have announcements going out on TikTok now, which is a very new avenue for me, I have to say. The website is always up to date as well. So any new sessions that we've confirmed or any new speakers we announce on the website as well. And that's where you'll find the most accurate and up-to-date schedules and exhibitor lists.
And the website, photographyshow.com, that is your best place to get tickets as well.
That is indeed.
Jolly good. In which case, I'll let you get back to planning more content, planning more speakers for the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on the podcast. And, well, look forward to seeing you in Birmingham in just a few weeks' time.
Absolutely. Thank you, David.
We are almost out of time. If you enjoyed this month's show, then please do all of the things that podcasts normally ask you to do. Hit subscribe, tell your friends, share with your local camera club, and hey, even leave us a review. There are photography and video show deals and competitions on the socials. On Insta, we are at The Photography Show. Search us up on Facebook too. James, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Where can we best keep up with your hot takes online?
Keep up with my hot takes, as ever, at digitalcameraworld.com. We're a great place to go for news, rumours. We've got some great reviews, some opinions. If you like the sort of things I've been spurting today, you'll have the hair raised on the back of your neck by all sorts of other things. We've got some great buying guides. If you are looking for a gift photographer in your life, great place to go. And as we lead up to the photography and video show, we're going to be ramping up our coverage, what you can look forward to, information on the kind of talks and the speakers you can go and listen to, workshops, so you can really go to the event in Birmingham and actually get some good value for money, because we'll tell you all the things to go straight to, where you want to queue up for, the people you want to talk to, the people you want to listen to. So head over to digitalcameraworld.com and get the inside scoop.
And as well as keeping up with you online, we'll be able to see you IRL at the aforementioned photography and video show from the 16th to the 19th of March in Birmingham, won't we?
We will indeed, yes. Look for the slightly dishevelled man with long hair who's probably looking for the nearest coffee outlet. But yes, if you do see me, please come and say hello. I know David's going to be there with us as well. Come and have a chat with us. Talk to us about the podcast. Tell us what you liked and didn't like. But yes, we'll be there live and in person, so come and have it out with me if you disagree with me on Micro Four Thirds or anything else I've been talking about lately.
I think that slightly dishevelled man with long hair looking for coffee, that might describe both of us come March. But let's see how we get on. See if I can schedule in a haircut between now and then anyway. But for now, James, thank you very much indeed. And thank you all for joining us wherever you are joining us from. Until next time, bye-bye.
Boom.
Rock and roll.